Speaking of route stems and receivers, it's not thought to be as good of a class as we've seen the last couple years in terms of wide receivers, Greg. We've got a couple of kids from Tennessee. We've got Jordan Addison from USC, Zay Flowers, Boston College, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, who didn't play a whole lot this past year for Ohio State. Was there a guy that jumped out to you looking at I don't know how many of these college kids you've had a chance to get to so far, Greg. But typically, if you watch 3 or 4 or 5, there's usually one that tickles your fancy a little bit. Is there anybody yet?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of receivers. And I will say this. I will say that, and I felt this way watching the tape, and there's a few I haven't seen, but they're not guys who would be considered, top 15 picks anyway. I don't think there's an alpha dog in this class, Ross. I don't think there's someone who would fit the bill of a Jamar Chase. Obviously, Justin Jefferson has turned out to be the ultimate alpha dog, but he was not seen that way coming out because he was, I believe, the 22nd pick in the draft or 23rd. But Jamar Chase was a clear alpha dog. There's not one in this class. But I'll give you a couple of names of receivers whose tape I really liked and actually performed very well at the combine as well. I really like the tape of Zay Flowers from Boston College. I really think that he fits the NFL game. He's a multi-locational receiver within the formation. He's got quickness. He's got speed. You can use him in multiple ways. He's a 3-level threat. You can work him short, intermediate, and vertical. You can use him on jet sweeps. You can use him in the screen game. You want to get him the ball in motion and space. He's got great burst and acceleration to run after catch. I really like Zay Flowers' tape. I ended up seeing him for 3 years because I kept thinking he was coming out. So I ended up watching his 2020 tape, his 2021 tape, and his 2022 tape.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that's interesting about this group is there's a bunch of guys that are not real big. Zay Flowers not real big. It feels like people aren't as concerned about that. Jordan Addison is another one that was really didn't weigh a whole lot. Did you get a chance to watch Addison yet, Greg?
I did, but I'm going to give you a guy that is big, Ross, and this guy I really liked on tape, and he's a name that is now being discussed. And when I was at the combine talking to different people, his name came up a lot, and I watched him maybe 3 weeks ago, and I loved his tape, and I think he's one of the most fascinating and intriguing receiving prospects in this draft, and that's Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss, who's 6'1 3/8 and 226. He's got a really strong traits profile: size, stride length, physical strength, competitiveness, can line up all over the formation. He's big, he's physical, he's smooth, he's very good run after catch. I'm not going to sit here. You know how it works, Ross. And I know that what I say goes out on social media. And very often people take it, not the way I mean it. So I'm going to say this. Mingo, in many ways, stylistically, okay, that's the key word, stylistically, and in terms of deployment, reminded me of A.J. Brown and Deebo Samuel. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that's who he is as we speak right now, but he's, like I said, he's over 6'1". He weighed 226. I think that he's a really, really good prospect.
Well, that's pretty much the exact height and weight of A.J. Brown. That almost running back build there, Greg, at 6'1", 225, that's almost more of a running back build. That's interesting because that's not a name that, we've heard as much. Any of these other guys, whether it's Quentin Johnston from TCU, either the Cincinnati kids, Smith and Jigba, Addison, anybody else jump out to you?
Well, I want to make a comment about Tyler Scott from Cincinnati, but I will say this about Smith and Jigba. He is not an explosive athlete in terms of vertical ability, but his ability to separate, he is another one of those really good separation generators. I think he can roll out of bed and be your slot receiver tomorrow. And he looked really explosive laterally at the combine. And if you go back to see his 2021 tape, that's what you see. So I think he can be that guy. The question is he more than that? And that remains to be seen. The guy I'd really like to talk about is Tyler Scott from Cincinnati. I really like Tyler Scott's tape. I actually like his tape more than Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. I think that Scott has vertical speed and explosiveness. There's no question about that. But I think he's more than that. He's got really good ball tracking skills. I think he can be deployed in the tunnel and the bubble screen game, jet sweeps. Obviously, he's not very big either. You mentioned Flowers. Scott's 5'10", 177. I think that there's a lot there with him, even as a route runner. He seemed to have a sense of how to use his vertical stem to get corners turned or to get them off their spot. So Tyler Scott, to me, could be an ascending player. The measurables are strong. The tape is strong. With the expansion of offensive concepts in the NFL, I think Scott's value will be enhanced. So he's a receiver that I really liked on tape, and another receiver I think fits today's NFL game.
Do you think it's interesting what you said about fits the NFL game? Do you think some of these receivers that have come out recently, like Devonta Smith, have changed the perception of? I mean, I know everybody wants that 6'3", 215-pound guy, but I think Devonta Smith and some of these guys have shown that you can do it another way.
Well, I think the factor too is with the expansion of offense, Ross, and the multiple formations and the use of motion and shifts, there's ways to minimize a receiver who's not big. Because obviously, everybody says, oh, he may struggle with press. Well, you see what teams do. I mean, look at the Super Bowl. Look how much motion the Chiefs use. A lot of teams use motion. They get receivers free access off the ball. They get them into their vertical stem with speed. So I think with the game expanding offensively, formationally, and the use of motion and the multi-location element with receivers, it's no longer, hey, a guy's an X, a guy's a Z. This is where he's going to line up. You know where he's going to be every snap. That's really not the way the game is played now. So receivers like a Devonta Smith, he doesn't line up in one spot, and a lot of receivers now don't line up in one spot.
Check him out on social media at Greg Cosell. He is outstanding. We will move on to a different position next week as we continue to get closer and closer to the NFL draft. Great stuff as always, Greg. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ross. Always appreciate it.